All right.
Yes.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of Gedling Borough Council Planning Committee and the first Planning Committee of 2021. So, Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Councillor John Truscott and I'm Chair of the Planning Committee. So I'll just go through the usual preamble, which we have to go through every time. Webcasting notice. I must remind you that the audio of this meeting is being live broadcast on the Council's website, and the video of the meeting will be published after the meeting and will be available on YouTube. Further details available on page 3 of your agenda papers. I have no idea how many hits we got last time. I couldn't find it on the website. I'd like to introduce the officers from Gedling Borough Council who will be providing support during this meeting. They are from the Planning Department, Mike Avery, who is Head of Development and Place, and we must congratulate Mike for his appointment to this new post. Kevin Cartwright, Principal Planning Officer, and Nigel Bryan, Principal Planning Officer. From our legal department, we have Sarah Pregon, a solicitor, and Sarah Fayaz, also from our legal department, who will be observing this afternoon. From Democratic Services, we have Alec Dudley, who is the Service Manager of Democratic Services, and Kate Goodall, who is the Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to the committee. There's no one else from Democratic Services here today, is there?
No.
Okay. Right. A few preliminary notices. Will all members of the committee please ensure that their microphones are switched off or muted at all times when they're not required to speak, and only switched on or unmuted when they are called on to speak and they speak clearly and distinctly into the microphone. When a councillor is called on to speak, will they please limit their contributions to 3 minutes or less in order that everyone gets a fair chance to express their views. Changes to normal procedure includes the following. 1, under apologies for absence and substitutions, the clerk to the committee will introduce all councillors who registered their attendance, as well as apologies and substitutions. At that point in the agenda, when I would normally ask for proposer and seconder from the floor, to simplify things, I will propose each item on the agenda as chair, and Councillor Paul Wilkinson will second as vice chair. This in no way is an indication of approval or otherwise to any proposal or application by either of us, but merely a means of expediting the proceedings. When it comes to that point on the agenda, when I'd normally open up the meeting for contributions from the floor, instead the clerk to the committee will ask councillors in alphabetical order to make their contributions, questions, etc. And will everyone please observe the 3-minute time limit. When it comes to vote on the recommendations at the end of the item, it will be similarly conducted. Okay, that is it. So we can move straight on to the first item on the agenda, which is attendance, apologies for absence and substitutions, and I'll hand over to Kate Goodall for that. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Good evening. So, Councillor Truscott.
Hello.
Councillor Wilkinson. Present.
Sorry. Good evening. I was on mute.
Councillor Adams.
Yes, present.
Councillor Peter Barnes.
Present.
Councillor David Ellis.
Present.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Present.
Councillor Elwood.
Present.
Councillor Mike Hope.
Present.
Councillor Keneally.
Present.
Councillor Lawrence.
Present.
Councillor Miller.
Present.
Councillor Paling.
Good evening.
Councillor Parr.
Present.
Councillor Scroggy.
Present.
Councillor Wheeler.
Hello.
And Councillor Smith.
Present.
So we've received apologies from Councillor Barnfather this evening, and Councillor Smith is substitute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Second item is to approve as correct.
I'm
record.
there now, John.
All right. Somebody speak.
It's only me, John. I went off. I'm okay now.
Okay. Second item on the agenda is to approve as correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of December 2020, which you'll find on page 7 to 25 of your agenda papers. I will move as chair and ask Councillor Paul Wilkinson to second as vice chair.
Seconded.
Thank you. Please indicate if you don't approve, otherwise we'll take them as read. I see no hands going up, so we'll take them as approved. The Planning Committee protocol, which you find on page 27 to 29, which I'm sure you've all read and understood, or I hope you have anyway. Third item on the agenda is declaration of interest. I will declare a collective non-pecuniary interest on behalf of all members on item 7, as the site is in the ownership of the council and the council is also the applicant. Okay, so we come to the first substantial item on the, or substantive, should I say, item on the agenda, which is agenda item number 4. Application number 2020/0504, land at Burton Road, Gedling, construction and operation of a hand car wash and valeting business, which you'll find on page 32 of your agenda papers. Now we have a couple of speakers on this item. We have a resident objector, Russell Cawtree. Is that the correct pronunciation of your name? Are you with us, Russell Cawtree?
Just a minute, Chair. Just give us 1 second. He'll come in now.
Hello, Russ.
Hi, Russell. It's Alec again. We've got you into the meeting now, so
Okay.
I'll pass you over to Councillor Truscott.
Hello, Russell.
Okay.
This is Councillor John Truscott here, Chair.
Hello, Councillor.
Are you okay?
Yes, I am.
Good. Is it Cawtree? Russell Cawtree? Is that the correct pronunciation?
That's pretty good.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Would you like to tell us what your objection is to this planning application of a car wash on Burton Road? And you have 3 minutes. Please
Okay,
try and
I'll-
fit the time limit.
I will do. I'll start now.
Okay.
I'm a member of a local campaign team who have been opposing this proposal since it was first presented in early 2019, and I'm speaking on behalf of the local community today. We are asking the committee to give serious consideration to rejecting this proposal. Our objections relate mainly to material concerns around visual and residential amenities. Despite the utilisation of a smaller plot and some design and landscaping enhancements, we still seriously question the appropriateness of the latest car wash plans being adopted in this location. The community simply do not agree that the planning assumption will have no significant impact as a result of the car wash being adopted. The local area has been described previously by planners as being populated by residential dwellings interspersed with small pockets of open green space, all of which helps to create a positive residential area. Our belief is that the planner's recommendation has not taken sufficient account of the precise shape and form of this land and its very prominent position within the heart of the local neighbourhood. Our community view remains that the car wash will prove to be an over-dominant facility and its day-to-day operation will inevitably impact on other people's lives. The business will be semi-industrial in nature and will be a full 7-day-a-week operation during daytime hours, utilising various plant and other machinery. We believe there is a contravention of local planning clause 32 regarding amenity, where consideration should be given to comings and goings and movement within a site which might disturb neighbouring properties or change in the character of the area. The proposal falls down on this key piece of planning criteria in our view. We seriously question the suitability of the perimeter fencing to both pen in and screen the car wash operation. A key point in our community's opposition is that in the 2019 planning case signalled that any additional fencing acting as a screen would not mitigate against the negative impact of the physical layout and thus would have an adverse impact on the characteristic of the land. In summary, we would ask the committee to reflect clearly on these key points of opposition and give your attention to the following questions. Firstly, is a car wash facility an acceptable development given the obvious poor fit described previously by planners? Secondly, are you content that the facility would not cause a significant adverse impact on nearby residents given an outdoor intensive day-to-day operation? And finally, is the deployment of inconsistent perimeter fencing a reasonable design feature, as such screening measures could compromise the open characteristic of this land? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Russell. Very well put. I'd now like to ask Nigel Bryan, Principal Planning Officer, to introduce this application for us. Nigel.
Thank you, Chair. An additional 5 letters of representation have been made since the agenda was published and expressed concern about the recommendation, but the comments received have not raised any new issues not previously covered. The application site relates to an area of land between Burton Road and Conway Road, adjacent to the junction with the Colwick Loop Road, which is currently vacant. Plan application for the same use, although it did include car sales too, was refused permission on the 29th of March 2019 for 2 reasons outlined on page 33 of the agenda. The first being on visual amenity and the second with regard to a lack of information in respect to flooding. The current application is the erection of 1 building measuring 10 metres by 2.5 metres along with 4 canopies. Access will be from Burton Road with egress onto Conway Road. Fencing is proposed around the periphery of the site, including mesh fencing and acoustic fencing, with a setback from the Ouse Dyke and Burton Road frontages. In terms of visual amenity, the scale of built form is reduced from that previous refusal, which does not consider the built form to be out of character of the area, given its small footprint and siting within the actual site. The site falls within flood zone 2, and there are no concerns in respect to flood risk, with the use being less than vulnerable and is not inappropriate. Water from the washing of cars under the canopies will be recycled with an ultimate outfall to the foul water network. In respect to highway safety, the one-way system will be the same as proposed under the previous application, to which the Highway Authority have raised no objection. Therefore, having regard to the planning history of the application site, amendments made to the scheme from that previously refused, and taking into account the observations of statutory consultees, it is recommended the application be granted permission, subject to conditions, as outlined on pages 41 through to 44 on the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the proposal is planning application 2020/054 for the construction operation of a hand car wash. I'll formally move the application as chair and ask Councillor Wilkinson for second vice chair.
Formally seconded.
Thank you. And Kate, will you open the debate by going through the roll call of councillors for us, please?
Thank you. So, Councillor Adams.
Hi, thank you, Kate. Yeah, Kate, can I just ask you something just quickly? Is there any way we can mute everybody just during the roll call in any way?
Yes, please. If everybody can mute and then unmute, please, when you'd like to speak. Thank you.
A lot of feedback. That's all.
Okay.
Okay. I'll get started. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Yeah. So I've spent a bit of time looking into this. I'd like to first of all thank the delegation panel for doing their normal fantastic work and sort of trying to work out the different prongs and everything else to do with this application. And obviously it makes a key introduction here in regards to some of the things they've pointed out. I'd like to kick off with the sort of the amenity aspect. I mean, I suppose you'd see this corner maybe as a bit of a gateway to sort of that lower area off the main street. Looking at the fencing and everything else, I'm not so sure that would be something visually appropriate as you pulled into that area. I've had a look around at the actual from a highway safety perspective, and I appreciate now that these cars will be parked, but if there is queuing at any point, you know, is that sort of the site really where that should be located if there is issues with queuing coming in again off that main road to continue with the normal flows of traffic. Area of which, by the way, does get incredibly busy, especially at the end of the day when people are leaving work from Colwick and the city also. My underlying other concern around this application is I've been reading about how they plan to mitigate the excess water, and obviously there's some discussions around a tank that then feeds into another tank that then eventually ends up in the foul water system, which again is obviously I believe pretty standard in these things. But I've got some concern about the way that the other water disperses into the ground. You know, a lot of the area that we're in tends to have a lot of clay in it, and my concern is once it gets under that initial level, are we onto clay, and then is that water going to disperse itself into that dike? You know, so I mean, having looked at it overall, and with the fact that the visual amenity effect, as well as those concerns I've got about water, I can't support this application tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
I agree with entirely what the Valley Council have just said. I don't think it's the right place. We've got one on Mance Road, and we have problems here at times. And Mance Road is a busy road. And this is more in the community than Mance Road one. So I don't think this is the right place for this particular business. I'm sorry to say, because we've got to support small businesses, but I don't think this is in the right place. So I can't support it, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor David Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's an improvement since the previous version, which is welcome. However, looking at it, I don't think it's gone far enough. I'm still concerned about the effect on visual amenity and residential amenity. Councillor Adams talked about the gateway to that part of Nottingham, and I think he's right. I think it will be a detrimental thing. I think the Environment Agency is being over-optimistic about the environmental impacts. I can see provision being made, but I can see that provision being overwhelmed. So I'm minded to vote against as well. Thank you.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Thank you. I too continue to have concerns despite the fact that this application has been amended, and they are for the reasons which have already been expressed, so I won't repeat them. Thank you.
Councillor Elwood.
Thank you, Chair. It's clearly a much less intensive development than the original application. It's about 35% smaller base than the original application. I struggle to find any reason to actually object to the application on this. It seems quite reasonable. Thank you.
Councillor Hope. Councillor Hope.
Sorry, I'd switched off for the previous person. I've got nothing to add to what's been.
Councillor Keneally.
No further comments.
Councillor Lawrence.
I regret that I've had problems in connecting, and I didn't hear all of the officers' comments, and I didn't hear all of Councillor Adams' comments. So I feel I'm not abstaining, I'm just not going to vote because I feel that I ought to have had that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you. I'm really surprised this has come on the agenda again. I know this particular area well. I walk it every day because I walk a dog there. Now, though they've changed their mind and put up fencing, I think that would be just as detrimental. It's a piece of waste ground. I note that one of the councillors had concerns about the water. I have too. But I think the most important thing is there are 3 traffic lights now. Opposite this piece of wasteland is the Gedling recreation ground, and there's an awful lot of people use it, football teams, dog walkers, and they like to come, that they have to cross 2 traffic lights and turn a very sharp corner on Burton Road. It is just not ideal. I think if they want some ideas on how to use it, plant some trees on there and support climate change, but definitely on health and safety grounds, I really do oppose this.
Councillor Paling.
Thank you. As other councillors have expressed, I have serious concerns about this still. My particular concern, I think, is that I don't see how car wash water can be contained to ensure it runs off into the main drain. I really do believe that there could be serious leaching of that water. The ooze dike is very, very close, and I do think it could well become contaminated, almost just as soon as we've got it clear to allow wildlife to flourish. So I am very, very concerned and minded to refuse the application. Thank you.
Councillor Parr.
Thank you. Yes, I've noted that both from the speaker and what's been written in, there's a very strong feeling against this development. And having took note and debated the previous application, there has been positive changes, but not enough in my eyes. So I shall be voting against.
Councillor Scroggy.
Yeah, I don't think I've got anything to add. Anything that I was going to say has been said already. Thanks.
Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to vote against this application. I've got serious concerns about contamination. I'm not convinced by the argument that the flooding, the issues around the water have been dealt with. I think there's a serious risk that we could end up with groundwater contamination and contamination of the ooze dike with the associated chemicals and other pollutants from the car wash, which will have a very detrimental impact, I'm afraid, on wildlife and plant life moving forward. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Yeah, loads of improvements have been made from the previous application, but it still leaves me 5 points of concern on why I'm going to vote against the application. All of them have already been mentioned, but I'm going to run through some of them. The traffic issues, I drive along Burton Road quite often. There's huge queues, especially at school, kicking out time and dropping off time. You add a car wash in there, and there's going to cause queues up the Colwick Loop Road, which we've seen already. So for me, that's a big problem. There's a car wash 100 yards down the road on Burton Road, so we can use that. Like it's already been said, the Environment Agency has been very optimistic. I'm really concerned about the contamination into the ooze dike, and I totally agree with Councillor Miller. By building a fence around it, you're taking away the open space. Let's plant some trees and utilise it as a community space. We need to vote this planning application down. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, I mean, as I was just said, these plans are an improvement on the original plans, but I share the concerns that others have expressed in respect of the visual and residential amenity, and particularly in terms of the danger of contamination of the ooze dike, which is an extremely valuable natural local resource, which we should be doing all we can to protect. So I am certainly minded to vote against.
Councillor Truscott. Councillor Truscott.
You're muted, John.
Muted, yeah. Obeying the commands. Recognising that the case officer has really done a great job in liaising with the applicant to try and make this application acceptable after its refusal in 2019, I'm afraid I'm still left with, to my mind, an application that is still unacceptable. And I'm looking particularly at the residential and visual amenity of the area. I mean, there's very attractive residential dwellings surround the application site. And I think that sort of replacing a bad development with a not so bad development isn't really going to make it acceptable. And, you know, trying to hide, you know, sort of an unacceptable development behind a screen of vegetation, we know from, you know, as being suggested in the paperwork, as we know it just doesn't work. And in the conclusions, the character of the area, the built form would be modest in scale and not prominent in the streetscape, and is considered to respect the character of the area. Well, I think it would introduce an incongruous feature to the street scene, to the detriment of the visual amenity of the area. And so very unfortunately and regrettably, I'm going to vote against this application. And as has already been mentioned, this is a very prominent site which you come to just as you are entering the urban area of Gedling. And I think it deserves something better than a car wash. So I would vote against this, I'm afraid.
Okay, would anybody like to come back? No, okay, thank you.
Right.
Kate, Mr. Chairman, Kate, I think Councillor Miller wants to say something. She had a
Oh, I do
physical
apologise.
hand up.
Yeah, it's just at one point I forgot to mention. It's on page 34. It says the letter of support notes the site is currently wasteland and that any highway concerns will be much reduced once the GAR is open and traffic in the area is reduced. I actually think I know the area well. I've drove there. That people will still use the loop road. They will not go up the Gedling access because it's more or less just singular. So the idea that it will slow down the traffic when there'll be less, to me, just doesn't make sense.
Okay, would anybody else like to come back before I close the debate? Nope. Okay, you're all content. We have the recommendation on page 41 of your agenda papers, and this is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed. I'll ask Kate to run through the roll call of councillors to record their votes, please, Kate.
I'm sorry, I lost volume. Are you happy for me to go to take the vote, Chair?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Against. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Against.
Councillor David Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Elwood.
For.
Councillor Hope.
Against.
Councillor Keneally.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Paling.
Against.
Councillor Parr. Is Councillor Parr there?
John, you're on mute.
Beg your pardon. Against.
Councillor Scroggy.
Against.
Councillor Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Against.
Councillor Truscott.
Against.
Okay, so the application was not carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Kate. Right, let's move on to agenda item 5.
Sorry, Councillor Truscott, if I could just stop you there. So the officer recommendation which was moved was to grant the application, which has not been carried. So the application still needs to be determined. So I wonder if any member would like to propose an alternative motion to actually deal with the application.
Right.
So
Can
for
someone
example,
explain? Yeah, sorry. Sarah. I've never been in a meeting where that's happened before, so I just wondered if you could
no,
explain.
of course. So the motion which was just before members was to grant planning permission subject to the conditions, and members voted against that recommendation. So the planning permission has not been granted, but it doesn't mean that planning permission was refused. So the item that the planning application still needs to be determined. So what would need to happen now is a member would need to propose an alternative motion. That, for example, could be to refuse the planning application, or it could be to grant planning permission but subject to different conditions. For example, if members were of the view that alternative conditions would make it acceptable. So what would need to happen now is for an alternative motion to be put forward and to be seconded, and then we would, if there wasn't required to be further debate, officers would just confirm with members the reason for refusal if that was the motion which was put forward, and then we would go to vote on that motion.
Right, well, I will move to refuse the application.
And then that just needs to be seconded.
I'll second that.
Matt, happy to second.
Councillor Wilkinson, did you say you were going to say you were going to second, or what?
Yes, I'm happy to second it.
Okay, so the motion now.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Councillor Truscott. So the motion now before members is to refuse the planning application. Obviously, the debate will be open again, but you may feel that you've said all that you need to say on this matter. If that is the case, then what I would ask is for Mr. Avery just to confirm with members the reasons that we've recorded it being the refusal, because we do have to give reasons where a decision is against an officer recommendation, and then we would move to the vote.
Thank you, Mrs. Bragon. I'd just like to provide members with some advice in relation to the reasons for refusal, having listened to the debate. So issues around highway safety and traffic, my advice to members would be that there's no evidence from the Highways Authority. A refusal on highway safety grounds isn't supported by the Highways Authority. And if members were to refuse the application on the basis of highway safety, it would be very difficult for us the Borough Council to defend such a reason for refusal on appeal, and that could put the council at risk of costs. Similarly, in relation to drainage, to mitigate foul water, we've received, the Environment Agency have looked through the proposals. They thoroughly assessed them, and they raised no objection to the proposals as submitted. So again, my advice to members would be that the council would be at risk of an application for costs. Thirdly, the issue in relation to the need for an additional car wash. If members were to refuse the application on the basis of need, that again could put the council at risk of costs, because it would be difficult for the Borough Council to defend a reason on the basis of our policies and established case law that was a sound reason for refusal. However, two reasons for refusal, which members have put forward, and I have drafted two reasons for refusal. that members may wish to consider, and which I feel members, they can give different weight to the considerations in the report, and they could, substantiate their reasons for refusal at appeal. So the first reason for refusal, which I have drafted, having listened to the debate, is the proposed development would, by reason of its form and appearance in this prominent location, have a detrimental impact upon the visual amenity of the surrounding area. The development would therefore be contrary to Part 12 of the National Planning Policy Framework and Policy 10 of the Aligned Core Strategy. The second reason for refusal that I've drafted is the proposed development would, by reason of the intensification of the use of the site, have an adverse impact upon the residential amenities of adjoining residents and would therefore be contrary to policy LPD 32 amenity. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, well, certainly. Thank you very much for that, Mike. You've encapsulated it in an excellent way that is, draws together all the relevant planning considerations. So I would agree with that wording myself. Would anybody like to contribute or make a comment or make an amendment to that? Paul?
I'd just like to say as seconder that I also support those reasons for that Mike has so expertly drafted. So thank you for that Mike, and I'm very happy to put my support behind it.
Marge?
Thank you. My comment, I still do have the concerns about the runoff, but I'm happy to go along with the as outlined now. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to comment, put in an amendment? Barbara, are you indicating?
Yes, I am.
Okay, let's hear it.
Thank you, Chair. I'm carefully studied and noted that I think planning has received 19 objections now. When I look through them, I feel these people have a point, and parking and traffic, it's a nightmare on Meadow Road. And though they've pointed out that they've now put yellow lines on Night Street, it makes no difference whatsoever. I think what people are more concerned about is that it's quite amazing, as the councillor for Netherfield Ward, I get about
wrong item.
Talk to people, and people
Chair.
I think.
Hello.
This is the wrong item, Chair.
Sorry.
Councillor Miller's talking about the next item.
All I want to say is that Netherfield has more than enough.
No, Barbara, we're not talking about that one just yet. We're just going to vote on the car wash one.
Oh,
okay.
I do beg your pardon. I'm so anxious. I will vote against the car wash.
Okay, John Parr.
Yes, thank you. I draw your attention to 7.5. And one of the things that Mike has touched on is the impact on residential amenity. You indicated earlier on, Chairman, about the impact coming into what is now part of the rural area of that area. And what it does say, 7.5, is the development will result in a new commercial use being introduced to an area predominantly residential in nature. And that is a fact. We cannot escape that. Although there is a public house, that's all part and parcel of the residential area, just the other side of the Hughes Dyke. So yes, unfortunately, I'm not going to change my mind, and I will be voting against.
You're quite happy with the form of words that Mike Avery read out to us?
Yes, I am.
As
Yes,
a
I am.
reason for refusal.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chairman.
So, anybody object to Mike Adams?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to add my own voice to that as well. I think Mike's captured the feeling of the room, and the support the words that he's put forward. And like we've said, it's the gateway to that area of Carlton, and it would right royally stick out in what should be and what is quite a pleasurable spot of green after a lot of grey. So I'll be backing the motion to go. Cheers.
Thank you. Sam Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, I welcome Mike Avery's comments, particularly on amenity, because as Councillor Adams just said, it's the green gateway to Colton, and a car wash wouldn't be welcome there. Can I just check on that point, Mr Avery, that both items you highlighted for refusal, is that the motion, both of them?
That's my advice to members, Councillor Smith, having regard to the debate. That there are two reasons for refusal, which I'd outlined earlier, and I'm happy to outline both those reasons again if members would like me to do that.
Thank you for that. No, I was just checking that both of them were part of the motion. So yeah, I'll be voting to refuse the application based on that. Thank you.
So just to be clear, Councillor Smith, those reasons will be recorded in the minutes, and they would also be recorded in any decision notice which is issued should the motion that's now on the table be carried. So that's the way that the reason why Mr Avery has read out that wording, so we can be sure that members agree with the reasons that will be recorded in the minutes and in the decision notice.
Super, thank you.
So do we need to run through the list of councillors for an official yes or no, Sarah, or just take it?
Yes.
Councillor Elwood's indicating, John.
Oh, I didn't see that. Andrew.
Thanks, Chair. Just a clarification. I know this doesn't happen very often, but I vaguely seem to remember a few years back. Does the committee need to appoint a number of councillors who are prepared to speak at a possible appeal for the application if it goes to the the government inspector? I vaguely seem to remember we had to do that a few years back. I don't know if that still applies.
It'll end up being chair and vice chair, won't it? And we're both quite happy to speak, aren't we, Paul?
Yes, John.
Okay.
So, Councillor Truscott, just to answer your last question, yes, we would need to vote now on the new motion. And just to be clear to members, so the motion that you're now voting on is to refuse this planning application. And Kate will just run through the list of names of councillors again for you to indicate how you want to respond to this motion.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
4.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor David Ellis.
4.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
4.
Councillor Elwood.
Against.
Councillor Hope.
4.
Councillor Keneally.
4.
Councillor Miller.
4.
You've forgotten me.
Passive.
Councillor Lawrence.
4.
Councillor Paling.
4.
Councillor Parr.
4.
Councillor Scroggy.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Councillor Truscott.
4.
Thank you, Chair. That was carried.
Okay. Shall we proceed now? Thank you very much. To agenda item 5, application number 2020/0484, 56 Meadow Road, Netherfield. Application for single-storey extension and change of use from C3 to sui generis HMO, which you'll find on page 46 of your agenda papers. Now we've got a speaker on this item, who is Claire Selwood, whose written representation will be read by Alec Dudley. Alec.
Thank you. Hello, I have lived around the corner from this property for 20 years. Netherfield may not have been the best external reputation, but ask everyone who lives here. It has a great sense of community with extended families living here for decades. First objection is the ground floor extension that will be visible over the fence and take up most of the back garden. It's not in keeping with this terrace and will stand out like a sore thumb and intrude on the privacy and light of numbers 54 and 58. Second objection is 7 tenants. More tenants equal more cars, coronavirus, noise and rubbish. I'm told there's a high demand for solo accommodation. Why then do local housing developments, Rivendell and Chase Farm, not include single occupancy dwellings? Third objection is parking. There's already parking issues in much of Netherfield. Why make it worse? These HMO developments cannot guarantee their professional, well-paid tenants will be carless. Public transport is discouraged at the moment. There is another HMO just 4 properties away at 5 Matlock Street, causing double parking trouble. Nottinghamshire County Council website states parking permits only work where the problem is caused by non-resident parking. Neighbouring roads are already crowded with cars. The planning officer's suggestion that public car parks are available is hilarious. 4 minutes walk away, £3 daily, insurance issues, poor lighting, rain, snow, carrying weekly shopping, work tools, OAPs, disabled with young children, really. In conclusion, why allow this here? Other streets are better suited for HMOs. Netherfield residents already suffer due to these developers. Some want to move because of the HMOs. Living on a street with an HMO is not a selling point. It is detrimental. There is zero benefit to neighbours. Developers, please choose your HMO areas more carefully and think about existing residents, not just your bank balance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now to call on the next speaker is the applicant, Mr. Silk. Is Mr. Silk with us this evening? Hello, Mr. Silk. Are you here?
Sorry, Ted, just 1 second.
Hello, Mr. Silk. Are you here?
Sorry, Ted, just 1 second.
Hello? Hi, can you hear me?
Hello. Are you masquerading under the banner of Edward's?
That's it.
Good evening, Mr. Silk. I'm Councillor John Truscott, Chair of Planning, and you are going to have 3 minutes to state your case, please.
Thank you. Good evening, councillors and members of the public. I am here today to talk to you about our development in Netherfield at 56 Meadow Road. We are proud of our development in turning this tired residential building into a high standard HMO. I would like to start by saying that we have had no objections from any officer within the council regarding this development. I wish we were able to show pictures or have had an open day to show people around the property prior to this meeting. But sadly, photos aren't allowed in this hearing and COVID has stopped us from having an open day. The property will be housed to seven professional occupants, and we believe our finished standard will be higher than that of other properties in the area. And because of this, we aim to attract very desirable tenants. We vet all applicants heavily. We conduct interviews with them, make sure they have references and are provided even before we consider their application. We have 3 of these properties and we treat each one as if each person living there would be staying with us in our own home. It's unfortunate that planning has taken so long, and due to this, the property is still in a state of development and not left in a representable state at present. We aim to have the project completed by the end of April, and COVID allowing, we would welcome anybody who would like to view the property prior to new tenants moving in to show the true standard we would achieve. We understand concerns raised by locals. It's a new process coming into the area with hardly any information given by ourselves on what its purpose is and who would be moving there. And for that, we apologise for not doing enough on informing the local community on what this new development could bring to their area. It's something we'll definitely take forward if we take on more projects. From our previous HMO developments, we have received compliments from our neighbours and surrounding properties on our management skills and standard of tenant. Because of this, there has been no adverse effect on property prices of those houses. Bins have never been an issue at any of our properties, and we apply to the council for the correct number of bins. We hear the concerns raised detailing the issue of parking. This property will be advertised as a no on-site parking and therefore potentially attract those without cars. If, however, they do have a car, there are car parking spaces in local amenity car parks as detailed in the Highway Department's reply. If highways did choose to introduce car parking permits, we would be more than happy to purchase all relevant permits. In our other properties, we have advertised no on-site parking and only one tenant ended up coming to the property with a car. I would like to finish by saying thank you for taking the time to listen. We believe that this property will become an asset of the area, and with our vetting procedure, we truly believe that the tenants can also become part of the local community. In line with the Planning Department's recommendation for approval, we also ask for you to approve and grant our planning permission. Thanks very much, councillors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silk. I'd now like to ask Mike Avery to introduce this application for us.
Thank you, Chairman. 56 Meadow Road is an existing 2-storey terrace property with existing accommodation within the roof space situated in close proximity to the Netherfield designated local centre. 19 letters of objection are summarised in the report. Further to the publication of the report, I have received a further 11 representations. However, they raise no new material planning considerations. The site is located within an urban area where the principle of the proposed use of the property, together with the use of the proposed extension as a house in multiple occupation, is considered to be acceptable, subject to an assessment of the impact. The view set out in the officer report, which I support, is that the use of the existing property and the proposed single-storey rear extension will result in no undue impact upon the residential amenity currently enjoyed by the occupants of neighbouring properties. Whilst there could be up to 7 unrelated people occupying the property, the facilities in the property will be shared by the residents. I fully accept that this will be different to a conventional family home, but the use is supported by Policy 8 of the Aligned Core Strategy and the local planning document, Policy 37, which sets a presumption in favour of a mix of housing tenures, types, sizes to create sustainable, inclusive and mixed communities. The proposed development would provide accessible accommodation for tenants in a very sustainable location, close to public transport links and the local amenities, and provide a mixed community. No on-site car parking is proposed or is possible. However, the proposal would not be precluded by our car parking planning policies, and the Highways Authority has raised no objection. There is a fallback position for the applicant to create a 6-bedroom, 6-person HMO and this is permitted development, which does not require planning permission. I recommend that the proposal is granted permission in accordance with the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mike. So, the proposal is application number 20/0484 for a single-storey extension and change of use to HMO. I will formally move the application as chair and will ask Councillor Wilkinson to second as vice chair.
Formally seconded, Chair.
Thank you. And I'll ask Kate to open the debate by running through the list of councillors. Okay, Kate.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Kate. Yes, a question for Mr. Avery. LPD 57 states parking standards states planning permission for residential development will be granted where the development proposal accords with the aims of the council supplementary planning document 2012, parking provision for residential developments or unless otherwise agreed in writing by the local planning authority. Can you explain to committee, please, Mr. Avery, how that ties in with how our own policy ties in with a HMO type property? Bear in mind, obviously, there will be 7 people in the property, and you know, how does that actually work within the confines of our policy? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. So our policy sets out car parking standards for dwellings, including houses, detached houses, semi-detached houses, terraced houses, and flats, which this is neither. So this is it's a house. It would be a house in multiple occupation. So the actual standards which are set out in Appendix D of the local planning document, those standards there cannot be applied to this particular proposal. We have had advice has been received from the Highways Authority. The Highways Authority has no objection, and we've given significant weight in the officer report to the sustainable location of the site, which is outlined in detail in the report, and which I've briefly summarised in my earlier presentation.
Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. My only concern, well, one of my biggest concerns here is there's 7 people, and it could possibly be 7 cars. And that's my really only worry. I just worry because we're in a situation where everybody today seems to think you must have a motor car, and I just worry that if we've got more parking in that part of the borough, then it's going to cause problems in that part of Netherfield, which is difficult now because most of the properties are terraced property where there's no space to build a garage and things like that. So I worry about the traffic impact and the parking impact on the area. That's my only concern, because I think this sort of property in the modern world, we need them sometimes, and it's just a matter of making sure we put it in the right place and we've got the right conditions in that area for it. So that's my only worry, the fact that with 7 people, and it could mean 7 cars, or it could mean more. And I just worry about from the traffic point of view in Meadow, because it is a problem in Meadow, which is becoming a problem everywhere now. So that's my only really concern. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor David Ellis.
Thank you. So this application was referred by the delegation panel because of the complexity and the effects on neighbours. We've had lots of representations, and as Mr. Avery said, had ones recently, which I've carefully considered, and it is one that I do struggle with. I can see that conversion of this property is acceptable, and residential use is fully acceptable. I'm concerned about the loss of affordable homes in Netherfield, that rather than family affordable homes, this will become just for solos, and we are concerned as a council about the lack of affordable homes. But I think my major concern, as Councillor Barnes has just said, is about the parking and the adverse effect that this will have potentially will have on neighbours and residential amenity in neighbours. So I'm would be reluctant to support it, and I'm minded to vote against this one. Thank you.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Thank you. Mr. Avery, I wonder if you can advise us, because I share the concerns about parking. There's a comment about residents who may have a car using local car parks, but my understanding is that local car parks are time limited and you have to pay, which is likely to drive people back onto the street parking. So that's one query. The second query is there is a comment within the report about cycle storage. I may have missed it, but I can't see it in the plans. I wonder if you can enlighten us on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. So in relation to the availability of public car parks in Netherfield, I think the point that the case officer is trying to make in the report here is that that contributes to the overall availability of car parking within the wider Netherfield area. In terms of the availability of the public car parks, there's two car parks. So there's Morris Street Car Park that has 36 standard bays, 1 disability bay, and it also includes an EV charging point. And there are some on-street bays as well. There's also the Victoria Road car park, which includes 25 spaces. And these car parks are free to use between 6 p.m. in the evening and 8 a.m. the following morning. So they're available for use during, sort of out of hours, or out of office hours during those periods. I've contacted the council's car parking officer, who's familiar with these car parks and indeed other car parks in the borough. And his observation is that these two particular car parks are not particularly well used after 4 p.m. on any day. That was his observation to me when I spoke to him about this matter earlier on today. In relation to a cycle storage facility, Mr. Cartwright, could you display the proposed layout plan, please? I can't see that on my screen at the current time, but in the absence of that plan, my understanding is that that will be provided within the amenity area to the rear of the property, within the garden area.
Thank you for that. So I guess the residents had better not have a lie-in, because they could get a ticket on their cars if they use the public car park.
Well, as I said, Councillor Ellis, in terms of the report, the public car parks in Netherfield, they do contribute to the wider provision of car parking in that particular locality. But I do accept that the proposal would put further pressure upon existing car parking spaces which are used by local residents.
Councillor Elwood.
Thank you. Yes, I've got some more questions for Mr. Avery, I'm afraid. First question I've got is on the floor plans. There are obviously six bedrooms. Now, unless I'm missing something, it refers in each bedroom to an occupant of one person. So I'm a bit confused where the seventh occupant's going to be living. The second question is, what is to stop this development being occupied by, say, 6 households of 2 couples each? So you could have effectively 12 people living in the property. And the third question, if this application was not passed and presumably the permitted development is for a HMO of 6 bedrooms. Would there be any limit to that situation with the number of people who could actually occupy the house? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Elwood. So I've actually come into the office tonight. So another member of the team has actually provided me with a layout plan because it wasn't available to view on the monitor a few minutes ago. So you're quite right. There are the actual plan that I've been provided with is the wrong plan. But I do recall the plans because I took a look at them earlier on today. So the proposal is for 6 bedrooms as detailed in the description, and one of the bedrooms would be occupied by 2 people. It wouldn't be permissible to occupy more than one of the bedrooms by 2 people because that would go above 7 occupants, and that's not what's been applied for in this particular application. So that there are some controls there that this couldn't have an unlimited number of occupants at the property. Does that answer your question, Councillor Elwood?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, the third point was a little bit sort of hypothetical, I suppose, but basically, if there's no application, can the owner just put as many people as they want in the current building, or are there some? Maybe that's not a licensing issue. Maybe that's not a planning issue, but more of a licensing issue, maybe.
Yeah, I think you make a good point that there is another level of control. So this area falls within Netherfield's covered by selective licensing. Would also need a license for a house in a multiple occupation. So there is another level of control that the council has in terms of the number of residents. But this is an application for a 6-bedroomed, 7-occupant HIMO, and it would, as I say, that there would be a requirement for a house in multiple occupation license, and that's also covered by selective licensing. So there's up to 3 levels of control there, so the council can control numbers of occupants at the property.
That's great. Thanks very much for that.
Councillor Hope?
Yeah, I too am very concerned about this because in Calverton we've got a similar problem. We've got narrow roads, we've got houses with no off-street parking, and we had a case very recently when a number of cars that were parked in one area suddenly could no longer park there, and now we have a situation where in the evenings, I'm fairly certain if it was required, we wouldn't be able to get a fire engine down the road. And these are the sorts of problems that occur, and it's not reasonable for our officer to say this isn't going to impact on the amenity value for the existing people who live there. It most definitely is. It is not acceptable to say, oh, we can go and park in a public car park. At the moment, parking will have sorted itself out, and quite rightly, if somebody moved into that house and there were a couple of cars, they could be accommodated in the general organisation. You're putting 6, probably 7 people into this building, and let's face it, if the gentleman who's proposing this is to be believed, these are all people who can more than happily afford to run a car, and most definitely will. And if he's also right that they're likely not to use it to go to their place of work because they'll cycle or whatever, then those cars are going to be parked permanently on the road. It's a problem that is going to simply exacerbate the life of everybody in the street for the benefit of an HMO. And you know, I do think the comment that was made speaking against it is right. If there is such a huge demand for one-bedroom places, why are they not being built? You know, probably because there isn't that much demand. My feeling is that you're putting into an area where I suspect the biggest day-to-day problem for all of them is finding somewhere to park their car at night within a reasonable distance of their house. And you're saying, you know what, we can stick another 7 or 8 cars in there and it'll be fine. And I don't think you can. You know, as I say, I've seen the problems that have occurred here in Calverton, and I really feel quite strongly if when we build new houses, we have a clear recommendation that for a one-bedroom house there'll be 1.5 places or whatever, and for a 2-bedroom house there'll be 3 places, whatever. How can we say that we will turn a property from a family house, I don't know how many bedrooms it's got at the moment, into a 7 individual families, because they are going to be individual families all living together, and it not impact negatively on every single person who lives on that road. So I'm very clear in my mind that I oppose this. I think we're moving in the wrong direction.
Couldn't agree more.
Councillor Keneally.
I share the concerns about the parking in relation to this. Nathan.
Councillor Lawrence.
Well, I'm very aware of where this is, and I'm very aware and have been for the last 40 years that Netherfield was built for the horse and cart, not for cars. I think it's very difficult for parking practically everywhere in Netherfield. And to say to people that, well, there's public car parks, has already been mentioned, I think is completely wrong. The reasons given by Claire Selwood why people might not want to use them for parking their car are quite right. I'm not a motorist, but I wouldn't want to park a car on a car park in Netherfield. But having said all that, I think it's very difficult to turn this application down. There is a large amount of the report taken up with parking. I note in 7.25 on page 53, there is a typo which says that when the property is marketed as an HMO, the rooms available would not state that no off-road car parking is available, and I believe the not should not be in there, and it should say it would stay. In terms of the necessity for provision of 1-bedroom accommodation, I suspect that the reason why developers on places like Rivendale don't provide it is because they wouldn't make so much profit. We do have in Colwick, my own ward, there is a site which has quite a few 1-bedroom accommodation, which tend to be masonettes, which is being built at the moment. Netherfield is also an area where housing is cheap, and it's not surprising that people would want to maximise the availability of accommodation in an area like that, and there is a need not just for family houses but for single accommodation. Until we get to a situation where we can say you can't have more than one car at the property, which I doubt will ever come to it, somebody could buy that as a family house, have 5 children who all have cars. So it's all. I'll finish in just a moment. It's already been established that if we turn down this and the applicant could then decide, well, I'll just turn it into a 6 persons accommodation, and a possible 7 cars would turn into a possible 6 cars, which wouldn't make much difference. So I would find it very difficult to vote against this. Thank you.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you. I think credit must go to Gedling in introducing licensing, residential licensing. It has worked very well, and what we have discovered is that Netherfield has 600 private owners who rent property, and now all of a sudden people are talking about HMOs now. To me, Netherfield is a family place. We have a school of 500 pupils at the primary. We've got a very, very good school there, and it is attracting families. And this is what we want. The houses were built for families. They weren't built for houses of multiple occupation. And really, Netherfield has now more than any other borough in Gedling. And I would like to see, as well as the traffic being sorted out, because I drive around there particularly quite a bit, visiting people, and the number of people that have recently either emailed me or I've only got to walk up where I live to the centre of Netherfield and I am stopped, and people are saying, Netherfield, what had a bad reputation, but we've worked really hard, we've stopped the antisocial behaviour, we still get damage to cars, no one's mentioned that with the traffic, where people park the cars and they've nowhere to put them. The idea of you suddenly come out of your home and your hand mirrors missing. But apart from that, Netherfield is full of property that has been there a long, long time, solidly built for families. We do provide quite a few HMOs. We've got more than any other, and I will be voting against this particular one.
Councillor Paling.
Thank you. Like most people who've spoken, I've got serious concern about parking. The use of our car parks is not suitable. In a 24/7 economy, with shift working especially, the free hours would not suit many of the residents of the area. And I think that would be especially true of the envisaged young professionals proposed for the HMO. Separate to this, maybe, we require parking spaces for business. And we've spent many hours looking at those. You've already said, Mike, that we do not require for sui generis. Is a national omission? People have not thought that these places will impinge on local areas, or is it something that we could look at locally? It won't help this application. I am very concerned that because highways haven't made any comment, and there has been, that's really what I consider quite stupid comment about using local car parks. It go against us, even though most of us seem minded to refuse the application. I do also have concerns about the extension. It does seem very large and will dominate the amenity, and I do think it will affect neighbouring properties somewhat more than has been stated. Thank you.
Councillor Parr. Councillor Parr.
Yeah, sorry, I'd like to echo all of the concerns my previous colleagues have raised. And when I look at the 19 objections, there's one that seems to be coming to the fore, and that's on about parking. But when you look at the other 18 objections, we could debate this particular application all night long. And we're getting from person to person. And what I see is, I don't like this type of development. It does nothing for me for the neighborhood. It does nothing for me for the family. And it does nothing for me for the business in that particular area. The parking, the refuse collection and the build up and the impact on the amenities and antisocial behavior, which Barbara has just touched on. I know the area well. I used to live in Gedling when I first came out of the forces. And I think to myself, it has not changed in all those years. Well, I don't want to see it change this way either. It needs and deserves better. So I'm against the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Scroggy.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask Mr. Avery something and point something out about the highway safety. In the recommendations on page 55, under the reasons for decision, it talks about there being no highway safety or parking issues from the Highways Agency. Obviously, I'd just like to point out that the Highways Agency have said that there shouldn't be any haphazard parking because it's a single yellow lined road. Now, I'd like to point out the fact that I'm a driver and I constantly see cars parked on single yellow lines all across the borough. So I do disagree that there could be problems with the highway. And quite frankly, I'm astonished that an officer of Gedling Borough Council suggested that residents could walk nearly half a mile to park their cars. It's just, I can't believe it, really. But the other question is I've got for Mr. Avery is this. The HMO is for 7 people, 5 singles and a couple. What enforcement could be taken if the other 5 residents decide to get a partner? Where would the HMO stand on that?
Thank you, Councillor Scroggy. Just to come back to you in relation to the availability of car parks in Netherfield, as I said in relation to Councillor Palin's question earlier, it wasn't Councillor Palin's question, it was Councillor Evans's question earlier on, that the car parks, it contributes to the overall level of car parking provision which is provided in the Netherfield area. In relation to your comment about the perspective, the overall numbers of occupants at the property, as I said earlier on, there are 2 controls that the council has. First and foremost, the planning application and enforcement of the planning condition, but also in relation to the actual operation of the property and how it's managed in practice on a day-to-day basis, there would be controls which could be enforced in relation to the licensing application. And I think the final comment that you made was in relation to the reason for the possible reason for decision on page 55. You picked up, you made reference to highway safety issues and car parking, and the comments that have been raised by the Highways Authority. The Highways Authority have been absolutely clear that they have no objection to the application. They could have raised concern. They've been consulted on the application. They're familiar with this particular locality. They're familiar with the proposed plans. So they had an opportunity to express concern, and they haven't expressed concern. And the case officer has drafted the report, having specific technical advice which has been received from the Highways Authority.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Wheeler.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, I've got very, very serious reservations about this application. One, the issues around, you know, the issues around parking particularly, but also I'm not a big fan of HMOs, to be honest, because of the health and safety implications of them in terms of the occupancy. I'm not sure you can guarantee that other people aren't going to be in that property at any one time. You know, I just feel that if we are to provide accommodation, then that accommodation, those flats, it should be flats. Those flats could be met on other, you know, land that's been brought forward that's currently being developed. So I think we should be looking at the housing supply in terms of meeting that demand rather than HMOs. I've got very, very serious reservations about this. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Kate. As most councillors who have spoken have said, I've got huge reservations about the parking. I think it was Councillor Barnes who said 7 people equates to 7 cars, but we take into account visitors, and there's another problem. Once permissions, you can't guarantee that people who are occupying these properties won't have cars, and once permissions granted, then you lose control of that. It's certainly not suitable to say that they will then park in public car parks. Not only is that costly and creates issues with disabled people, people who work shifts, etc., like that. It also creates another issue, which for me is everyone on this council spent a long time investing in Netherfield, tackling crime and antisocial behaviour and bringing it up to a better standard. If we're then going to encourage people to park in public car parks, that will be detrimental to our high street that we're trying to boost down there and to the local businesses. So we've got to take that into account. And all it will do, people won't use the public car parks, and we don't want them to. As I said, we want to boost the businesses, not take away from them. It will just increase the parking issues on surrounding streets, which is a whole new problem. So we need to refuse the application, not just based on parking, but that's the biggest issue.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Kate. I'm another one who's got some concerns about this application. Look, I don't have an objection in principle to the idea of this type of development. I think there is a need, and I think this particular application is clearly aimed towards young professional people, perhaps on their first step towards independence, and if they are the sort of people who are likely to have a car, whether or not there is provision on site or not, which clearly there isn't. So I have real concerns about the parking amenity for local residents and the potential impact on that. I think others have already mentioned the inappropriateness of public car parks, although I do take on board the comment that that's about the overall parking provision. But the other element of residential amenity I'd like to cover, which one or two have mentioned, is that Netherfield is one of the few areas of the borough which is genuinely affordable for local families, and I think taking yet another property out of that provision is detrimental to the area of Netherfield, because once it's gone, it's gone. So whilst I don't have any concerns about the actual type of property, it has to be in the right place, and I don't feel that this is the right place for an HMO of this type, and I really am concerned about it.
Councillor Truscott.
Thank you. Well, like everybody who's spoken so far, I don't like this development at all, and particularly there's been a concentration, although the reason for it being sent to full planning by the delegation panels, highway safeties and parking and amenity, I don't think we've had a great deal of the light has fallen on the amenity side of things. And with highway safety and parking, I think it's kind of convenient that HMOs, being sui generis, are not subject to the SPDs as outlined in Appendix D of LPD 57, which Councillor Adams touched on at the start of this debate. But as such, from planning considerations, we can't, it seems to me that there's not a lot of that we can, although it's very subjective, I don't think we can take it in very objectively. And as the agent has already advised that if the proposal is refused, their fallback position was to convert the property into 6 bedrooms, 6 residents, which doesn't require planning permission anyway. I think it is better if we approve this application, so at least we will have the conditions to fall back on as some measure of control over this. So regretfully, in my opinion, there are no material planning considerations that would make me vote against this. So I have no option as a planning councillor but to vote in favour of granting planning permission.
Would anybody like to come back? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. The application is 2020-0484 for, sorry, we've got to the recommendation on page 55 of your agenda papers to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed. I'll ask Kate to run through the roll call of councillors to recall their votes.
Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Barnes.
Against.
Councillor David Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Elwood.
For.
Councillor Hope.
Against.
Councillor Keneally.
Against.
Councillor Lawrence.
Welcome, Alice.
Councillor Lawrence.
Sorry.
4. Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Paling,
Against.
Councillor Parr,
Against.
Councillor Scroggy,
Against.
Councillor Wheeler,
Against.
Councillor Smith,
Against.
Councillor Wilkinson,
Against.
and Councillor Truscott.
For.
Chair, that wasn't carried.
Okay, so now we have again, we must put forward a motion to refuse. Well, as I voted against it, I can't put forward myself, can I?
Councillor Wilkinson, would you like to put forward the alternative motion as vice chair, and perhaps another member could second it? Because I agree, Councillor Truscott, the way you voted it would be better for somebody else to put forward the alternative motion.
Yeah, I'll put forward a motion to refuse.
Refuse, thank you. And would anyone like to second that?
I'll second that.
It.
Councillors, if I could provide some advice, please, in relation to the reason or reasons for potential reasons for refusal. I've listened to the debate, and there was a lot of discussion in relation to car parking, and some members suggested that there were concerns in relation to highway safety. My advice to members will be, in the absence of any objection from the Highways Authority, it will be difficult for this council to substantiate a reason for refusal on highway safety. And again, in accordance with the advice that I said earlier on, if there's no technical, if no evidence to support highway safety issues, that could ultimately result in an award of costs. I think that the members, the concerns were about the proposal creating additional demands for very limited on-street car parking. So a possible reason, for refusal, which I have started to draft during the debate, having listened to that, is as follows. The proposed development would, by reason of the intensification of the use of the site, have an adverse impact upon the residential amenity of adjoining and nearby residents and the character of the area. The proposal would also result in additional demands for very limited on-street car parking to the detriment of existing residents. The development would therefore be contrary to policy LPD 32 amenity.
Move it.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, as proposer of the motion to refuse permission. I once again thank you for your expertise in assisting us in drafting that, and I'm very happy to support it on that basis. My objection was on the grounds of residential amenity rather than highway safety, for the reasons that have been given, because there are no objections raised by the Highways Authority on those grounds. So thank you for that, and I move the proposal of the refusal.
Before we go to the vote, Chair, could I just ask whether any members did want to add anything further to the debate, just with this being a new motion? I think all of the issues were already discussed under the previous one, but it's correct that we just check procedurally whether anybody else has anything further to add, and then we can move to the vote on that motion to refuse.
Could I ask something, please? Could Mr. Avery please elaborate on what controls we may have lost if we turn this down, and what controls there will be on a 6 occupant HMO, which we've already been told is the fallback position of the developer.
That will be permitted development, Councillor Lawrence.
Yes, I understand that. I'm just asking what controls will we actually, or what controls we'd actually lose by turning this down and accepting that a 6-person HMO might come in its place. Am I not being clear?
I think I understand. I think I understand what you're saying, Councillor Lawrence. So the 7th occupant wouldn't be permissible, and this will be controlled through the licensing regime, which I outlined earlier on. So it will be necessary for the owner of the property, if they utilise their fallback position, they would still need to apply for a licence. So there'd be 2 licences that they would need to apply for, a HIMO licence and a licence under selective licensing. And the council would have control over matters which the legislation governing those licensing regime permits the council to have.
Thank you. That still doesn't say what we would lose if we approved the application.
Perhaps I could assist Councillor Lawrence in terms of what might be lost. So they would be able to implement a development under permitted development rights for a 6-person house in multiple occupation. The application which was before you, the officer recommendation was to attach conditions to any planning permission if it was issued. So we would lose control of being able to put any planning conditions because they would have the right to do that under a permitted development. I don't know if that assists in terms of your query or if you have anything further to ask.
No, that does. Thank you very much.
Marge, do you want
Thank you. Can I check, the application included the single-storey extension? Is that part of the permitted development rights? Because it seems very large for such permission.
So the permitted development right, because this is not a detached property, it will be subject to a prior notification. So I think that is a good point that you do raise, Councillor Palin. So the actual extension wouldn't be permitted. It's not permitted development. So that is a point that I think that is a very valid point that you raise, that this extension it couldn't proceed detailed on the drawing.
Thank you.
John Parr.
No, I've my question related to quite a lot of what's just come up, John, so I'm okay.
Mike Hope. Mike Hope.
It's really just a question. Which committee on the council then will be considering the licensing arrangements of such an HMO? I'm assuming it's environment and licensing, but I don't know.
That's correct.
Yeah, Councillor Hope, just to note as well, it may not necessarily be an application that would be determined by committee. It would depend on the scheme of delegation that is in place. So it might be that is an officer delegated decision, but certainly it would be under the remit of the Environment and Licensing Committee. But I can't say that it would be a matter which would be referred to committee for determination.
Right.
Andrew? Hello, Andrew.
Yeah, sorry. Well, it's all a bit academic now, I suppose, but by my reckoning, if you've removed the extension and they're allowed to have 6 bedrooms, then the poor people in this building now have lost their lounge. As far as I can tell, there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rooms. So presumably they're going to have a kitchen, but presumably they've lost the lounge now. So anyway, I just thought I'd mention that.
So that would need to be considered, Councillor Elwood, through the licensing application to ensure that the property does provide the correct level of amenity for the occupants.
Okay, anybody wants to come in before we put it to the votes? No, okay, Kate.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
4. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor David Ellis.
4.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
4.
Councillor Elwood.
Against.
Councillor Hope.
4.
Councillor Keneally.
4.
Councillor Lawrence.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Paling.
4.
Councillor Parr.
Against.
Councillor Scroggy.
4.
Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Wheeler.
4.
Councillor Smith. Councillor
4.
Smith.
4.
Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Councillor Truscott.
Against.
That was carried.
Okay. We have to sort out the aftermath of that when it happens. Right, we move on to agenda item 6. Application number 2020/0630, 45 Ashwell Street, Netherfield. Change of use from C3 to sui generis HMO, including loft dormer extension, which you'll find on page 58 of your agenda papers. We've got speakers on this application. We have a resident objector, Russell Whiting. Russell Whiting with us. A resident objector, Russell Whiting. Hello, Russell.
Hi, can you hear me?
Whiting with us. I'm Mr. John Truscott, I'm chair of the committee. A resident objector, Russell Whiting. Hello, Russell. Hi,
Mr. Whiting, have you got the live stream in the background?
Sorry, yes.
Could you turn that off for us? Thank you very much.
Sorry about that.
Oh, you got your pet dialect listening in. Okay, you got 3 minutes to state your case, Russell, starting now.
Thank you very much. I live at number 18, and I know councillors have had a lot of correspondence on this from local residents, which shows the strength of feeling in our community. Regarding parking, Nottinghamshire County Council recognised in the officer's report that, quote, an inconvenience would be caused with on-road parking as a demand of potentially 7 new cars on our street. People have partners who also drive to see them at night, so potentially 14 cars. There are at least 3 empty properties on Ashwell Street at the moment, with many other properties having cars, but yet our road is continually rammed with cars. This evening I've had to park on an adjacent street. The end of Ashwell Street, like most in this area, has a turning circle for emergency services. This is typically double parked as well, meaning not even a car can turn around, let alone a fire engine. We also have problems with cars parking close to the junction with Ashwell Street and Knight Street, making crossing the road dangerous, especially with small children. I'm sorry to repeat this, but in 721 planning report, it suggested that residents can park in public car parks. I don't know how many of you currently leave your cars in a public car park overnight, but the nearest one to my house is 820 foot away. It costs £3 a day to park. Yes, it may be free out of office hours, but I work at home and other people on our street work shifts, so that's no good for us. We've been told by our insurers we'd have to declare if we were to park there, and it would have either invalidate our insurance or increase our premiums. I'd welcome councillors to come with me next time I go shopping with my 2 small children, park in that public car park and negotiate our way home through Netherfield Centre with a week's worth of shopping and 2 small children. This suggestion from planning officers is frankly insulting to residents. The local plan gives presumption in favour of sustainable development. We do not believe HMOs are sustainable. This is the loss of an affordable family home. And with a toilet, sink and shower in nearly every room, turning it back into a family home will be cost prohibitive. The planning report also states a mixture of residential housing is needed. But this is important to say, this is not a 1-bedroom property. This is a 1-room property. Residents in this HMO will be expected to sleep, eat and use the toilet within feet of the same place. We believe that rejecting this application will show Gedling Borough Council has higher aspirations for the residents of Netherfield. It will show that it's on the side of the 100 residents of our street and others who have signed our petition, and the vast majority who do not want Netherfield to be overrun with HMOs. We are under no illusions that rejecting this planning application is largely symbolic, because the developer has already indicated that he will be going ahead under permitted development rules, with no regard to the wishes of the residents of this project and others in the community.
3 minutes, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Russell. I have to call a halt there. Thank you very much for your contribution. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
I now call upon, where are we? Ray Murphy.
Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
hi there, Ray. You've got 3 minutes to put your side of the case.
Lovely. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Ray Murphy, one of the owners. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk today. Imagine you've left home, finished your studies, and now have a job. You have no deposit or savings, but you want to save to buy your own house. Renting an entire house means that your outgoings are at least £1,000 per month, leaving very little disposable income, let alone an opportunity to save. The alternative is a house share. This house will be a high quality accommodation housing professionals. We vet all tenants. Examples of the tenants we have living in other HMOs of ours are nurses, neurologists, trainee dentists, and an ecological advisor working for the council. Without this type of accommodation, these people can't build up savings to buy their own home. The council's needs, according to the National Planning Policy Framework of 2019, is to deliver a sufficient supply of homes. We are contributing to this by offering multiple people a place to live, which otherwise would only house one household. In the local planning document, it says planning permission should be granted for residential development that provides for an appropriate mix of housing that is affordable. We are providing homes with all bills excluded, who otherwise could not afford to pay rent and bills on top. In 2011, there were 112,000 people living in Gedling, which has massively grown since then. The document outlines that this growth is from single individuals who need suitable accommodation, which we are providing. Permitted development rights allow any house to be rented to up to 6 households, which in effect means that this application is making for 1 additional bedroom. When compared to a 6 or 7 bedroom house, many of the objections become insignificant. With regards to the parking, Highways have raised no objections. We would like to offer further reassurance. Out of the 100 tenants we let to, only 6 have cars. Do not allow a high number of cars. Tenants live in HMOs for their convenience to the city centre and transport routes. Tenants will use public transport to get to work or ride. We'll be providing bike storage to encourage this, which will be in the back garden. With regards to waste, 1 additional bedroom is not going to create a huge amount more waste. To keep the property in good condition, we have gardeners and cleaners who attend the property fortnightly and we regularly inspect. This is our property that we expect to be kept in a good condition, not only for the tenants' benefits or the neighbours, but for our own as well. I have read worries we should not be allowed to run a HMO. We hold many HMO licences and have never been refused one, and adhere to all regulations, as the Environmental Agency have said. We have won 3 awards for the high standard of homes we create. We are competent and caring people. The house will be looked after. The tenants will be professionals who deserve to live in a happy, safe and peaceful community. This is a new modern version of a HMO, which is a co-living look-through environment.
3 minutes, Chair.
Okay, I'm
Thank
sorry,
you.
Ray Murphy, but thank you very much for your contribution. I'd now like to ask Mike Avery to introduce this application for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman. 45 Ashwell Street is an existing 2-storey end of terrace property situated in close proximity to the Netherfield designated local shopping centre. The loft conversion includes a dormer window unit to the rear roof plane. 37 letters of objection are summarised in the report, and it should also be noted that a petition signed by 57 residents has been received. Further to the publication of the report, I've been provided with 8 additional letters of representation. The representations raise no new material considerations. The site is located within an urban area where the principle of the proposed use of the property, together with the use of the proposed converted loft space as a house in multiple occupation, is considered acceptable, subject to an assessment of the impact. The view set out in the officer report, which I support, is that the use of the existing property and the dormer window unit comprised in the loft conversion will result in no undue impacts upon the residential amenity currently enjoyed by the occupants of neighbouring properties. Whilst there could be up to 7 unrelated people occupying the property, the facilities in the property will be shared by the residents. I fully accept that this will be different to a conventional family home, but the use is supported by Policy 8 of the Aligned Core Strategy and Local Planning Document Policy 37, which sets a presumption in favour of a mix of housing tenures, types and sizes to create sustainable, inclusive and mixed communities. The proposed development will provide accessible accommodation for tenants in a very sustainable location, close to public transport links and local amenities, and provide a mixed community. No on-site car parking is proposed or is possible. However, the proposal would not be precluded by our car parking policies, and the Highways Authority has raised no objection. There is a fallback position for the applicant to create a 6-bedroom, 6-person HIMO, and this is permitted development, which does not require planning permission. I recommend that the proposal is granted permission in accordance with the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mike. So there we have the proposal, application number 2020/0630, change of use from C3 to sui generis HMO and loft extension. I'll formally move the application as chair and ask Councillor Wilkinson to second as vice chair.
Formally seconded, Chair.
Thank you. I'll Kate to open the debate by running through the list of councillors again, please. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Same subject, nothing to add at the moment.
Councillor David Ellis.
I appreciate that we deal with all applications on their own merit. So I've looked at this one carefully and read the various representations, and the issues it raises are very much the same issues as the previous application. Can I just ask Mr. Avery one question? The application includes a dormer window. If the application's turned down and the dormer isn't built, what's lost? Are 2 bedrooms? There's 2 bedrooms on the second floor. Would they both be lost?
So the issue here is whether or not that rear dormer window unit is permitted development, and that will depend upon the volume of the actual dormer window. I can't calculate that now during the meeting. I think it would be difficult for another one of the team in the planning service here with me to calculate the volume. It may be permitted development, looking at that. I need to go through the relevant part of the general permitted development order before I could provide that advice. So if the fallback position for the applicant would be to erect a smaller dormer window unit if it wasn't permitted development, and to remove one of the bedrooms at second floor level, or one of the other bedrooms in the property, so that it comprised of 6 bedrooms and not 7.
Thank you.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Councillor Elwood.
Thanks. Yeah. A question and also 1 or 2 observations. Question is, I may have missed something, but I can't see in the report anything about the specified number of occupants, unlike the previous application that we've just discussed. I can't see anything on that. Also, 2 observations. I'm not very happy about the shared bathroom facility on the second floor plan, and also on the ground floor. That they just seem to have like a sort of kitchenette sort of lounge area rather than a separate lounge, which again seems a bit poor, I suggest. But as I say, just the main question is how many people can actually occupy the property.
Thank you, Councillor Elwood. The number of occupants is detailed in the description of the proposal. So the description of the proposal is a change of use from C3 dwelling house to 7-bedroomed HMO, including loft dormer extension. So it's a 7-room HMO. In terms of some of the comments that you've made in relation to the bathroom facilities, that would be controlled through any future licensing application, as would the numbers of occupants at the property. So that's a level of control which the council has.
Okay, Councillor Hope.
My comments on this one are exactly the same as they were on the previous application. I don't think it's acceptable.
Councillor Keneally.
Nothing further to add.
Councillor Lawrence.
My comments are exactly the same as they were on the previous application.
Councillor Miller.
I would just like to add to that the list of objections. The majority are non-material objections. The only objection I think that is relevant is to do with parking, and we've covered that.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you. I am totally against this, as I am with the previous references to HMOs, but Ashwell Street, the houses are beautiful. They may have a narrow frontage, but they are really big, beautiful family homes. Recently, we've just had a new medical centre built, which has enhanced also a very nice residential street. If you walk down to the end of Ashwell Street, you'll see where Gedling Borough has now made a cinder path, which was a really sore eyesight, but now I should say it's classed as more residential. And I actually think the parking issues are really, really serious here, because there are so many turnings. And also now the medical centre has taken some space. I can't understand why Netherfield has been targeted. Or the only reason I think is, though I listened carefully to Ray and what she said, but I can't see them actually going to that much trouble just for one building. I think they're hoping that in time they will buy more houses, and then we will start losing community and family. And this is what we are proud of in Netherfield. We have a steering group, we invite residents, and they've let us know in no uncertain terms they are against HMOs. I think we have enough. We do provide for the elderly. We've got a new school being built not far away in Colwick. We've got a primary school with 500 children. I want to see Netherfield thrive, not turn into rented properties. Thank you.
Councillor Paling.
Thank you. Along with the concerns that we've already expressed, parking, etc., I do have an additional question about this property in terms of the loft conversion. If it were a family home converting the loft, I wouldn't have quite the concerns about fire safety, in that the family would have an awareness and a concern for the members that may be sleeping in the loft space. As this is separate, I do wonder if there shouldn't be some element of fire escape for that third story element were we to grant it. And I don't see how that's possible from the dormer windows. We have required fire escapes on the properties where it's rented accommodation above the sheds on Victoria Road, and yet there seems to be no report about fire safety for this. Is that because of the nature of it, or because it just doesn't seem to have entered people's mindset, please? Thank you.
The matters that you've raised, Councillor Palin, would be controlled through the building regulations. So this would be a new dormer window unit, and the actual, from a building regs perspective, it will be a change of use, regardless of whether it was permitted under, regardless of whether it was undertaken under permitted development. It would require an application under the building regulations.
And would it be possible to have some sort of ladder escape from that? Would the building regs look at that issue, as it is a simple family conversion? It concerns me that other people in the house may not be aware of who's in the property, whereas hopefully in a family home you are more aware of that sort of issue.
Yeah, the issues that you've raised would be considered through the building regulations, and that is a separate process.
Thank you.
Councillor Parr.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kate. Yes, we've gone on long enough about the fact that there's a big need for affordable homes. What we don't want is buildings like you've just seen and described by Councillor Miller going down the Swanee. We do need affordable homes. We are building a few, but not enough. And at the same time, we're converting what I call Victorian type frontages and adds to the area of that particular street. And quite honestly, it leaves me with a big concern as to where we're going with it. So with that in mind, I shall be voting accordingly.
Councillor Scroggy.
Thank you very much, Kate. It's a bit of a difficult one because of item 5. I'm getting some feedback from someone's mic. Let's see if
Could
that's any
everybody
better.
mute their microphones, please, if they're not speaking? Thank you.
I think that's better now, Kate. Thanks. Yeah, this is a bit of a difficult one for me because of the last item that was on the agenda. Obviously, highway safety for me on the last agenda. I think I didn't make it clear enough, and I don't want to go over it too much because I might get in trouble from the chair. But the fact that the last one was at the bottom of a steep hill that joins a junction of 3 roads was my issue. Like I say, it's a bit different on this one, but I'm still a bit unsure about this. That's it. Thanks.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Yeah, again, same issues as before. Also, it's been mentioned a few times already that potentially it's the loss of what could be an affordable home for a family. And I know this the speaker Ray spoke a lot about the affordability of finding a place for a lot of people that are just starting out. But you know, I think what we need to be doing is building more affordable accommodation to meet those needs through you know, social rent, for example, but also properties that people can genuinely afford to buy to meet that need. I just feel that HMOs aren't going to meet that need moving forward. I think we generally need to concentrate on providing some of the, you know, that need on sites that we're currently developing. But yeah, I do have concerns as previous, and also I have concerns that the issues around health and safety again within HMOs always springs to my mind as well. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Kate. I visited Ashwell Street and met with Russell and neighbours to before this, and they, you know, there's a real sense of community that's trying to be built in Netherfield that Councillor Miller alluded to in her comments, and I think HMOs will rip out the heart of that and take away the hard work that this council's done to invest and bring up Netherfield. Not only because if HMOs pass, you're going to be falling out with your neighbours about parking, and I add the comments I made on the previous application to this one. The parking issues will be a nightmare. You'll add to the roads, surrounding roads, and it will just not be good. So I'll be voting against the application.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, my concerns around residential amenity are similar to the previous application. I was going to ask about, you know, what of the physical changes could be done under permitted development rights anyway, but Mike Avery's answered that following Councillor David Ellis's request. One thing I noted in the applicant's contribution, which made my eyebrows rise a little bit, and I'm sure they probably did with one or two others, was the statement that this application will not increase the amount of on-street parking. I thought that was a very bold statement on behalf of the applicant, and I don't see how they could possibly control that. If they can, by all means, they can state that there is no off-street parking, and that may dissuade some people, but I can't see any way that they could actually control whether or not their tenants actually own cars or not. So I certainly would wish to disregard that statement in support of it. But yeah, my concerns are very much the same as with the previous application. Although I do agree that each application has to be dealt with on its own merits. Thank you.
Councillor Truscott. Councillor Truscott, you need to unmute.
Yeah, I'll start again. Sorry about that. I'm not particularly happy about this application either, for reasons that people have already made out. But some speakers have said that the way round this is that more affordable housing should be built. But as the applicants put forward, the people who avail themselves of HMO don't want to buy affordable housing, even if they could afford it. That's not what they're looking for. They're not looking for, they're just looking, as she said, they've just left university, etc., getting a job. They want somewhere that they can move on from after a couple of years, 3 years or so. They don't want to lumber themselves with a house, affordable or not. And I think that, we have got to make provision for people like that. And HMOs seem to be the answer, and they seem to be, a good quality of an HMO. And so, okay, it is it's got a good street scene there with the frontages, but they're not doing anything to denigrate that. They're not going to alter that. They're not going to sort of start slapping inappropriate windows or doors in places. So from the street, it's no detriment to the street scene at all. This is supported, as was pointed out by Mike Avery, by the Aligned Course strategy, the local planning document. There's no complaints from highway safety, no complaints from environmental health officer. Once again, the same with the previous application. I can find no material planning considerations whatsoever that would make me vote against this application. Thank you.
Would anybody like to come back? Councillor Parr, you have your hand raised.
Sorry, I didn't mean to have it raised, Kate.
Okay, would anybody like to come back? Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yes. Councillor Wheeler.
I did actually mention for rent, not just to buy. I did mention the need to have affordable rent, which is provided by probably social landlords. So it wasn't just about buying; it was about renting at an affordable rate. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to come back before you're content as I move to the vote?
Yes, John. I'm not really against this type of development, but most young people nowadays, they either want a flat or they want a house, and most of them start off with flats nowadays. And if this would have made into two apartments or two flats, then there probably would have been no problem. But to make it just as it is at this point in time, I think it goes against all what we're trying to do in society. We want people to be independent, but we want them to live in decent property. And I think 8 people in one building is a little bit much. So I think on them grounds, John, I would not agree with the application.
Okay, fair enough. Anyone else like to come back before we move to the votes? Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I kind of sort of agree with Councillor Barnes there. You know, if this was rented out to maybe a family or even converted into 2 flats, I think that would be appropriate. That's all I want to add, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Councillor Adams has his hand raised.
Thank you. Yeah, just to sort of extend on the parking point that we've talked about already, which I know obviously is a material consideration in these things. But obviously also along with the parking, somebody alluded to visitors coming, but obviously there's also deliveries. You know, we also live in an environment where we're getting the majority of our products these days via transport. You know, if you've got 7 individuals, effectively, could we be getting 7 prime deliveries, you know, one after the other in that area? Is that 7 vans? You know, what are we talking about as far as numbers are concerned? There are those things to consider as well. I mean, we have our shopping delivered by Morrison's, you know, is 7 people, 7 vans, maybe they're like a different supermarket. You know, is that what we're talking about? So I think there is that to consider, which ties in with the parking, admittedly, because they have to have somewhere to pull over, as well as the resident provision and living there as well. So I just wanted to make that as a final point towards the parking. Thank you, Chair.
Don't forget, Councillor Adams, that our great leader says that this will all be over in a couple of months. So maybe there won't be delivery vans.
I've been having Morrison's delivered for years. Cheers, Chair.
Okay. We where are we now? We are on Ashwell Street. Recommendation is on page 67 of your agenda papers, and it is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed. If Kate could run through the roll call, please.
Yes, Councillor Adams.
Again, thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Against.
Councillor David Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
Against.
Councillor Elwood.
Against.
Councillor Hope.
Against.
Councillor Keneally.
Against.
Councillor Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Miller.
Against.
Councillor Paling.
Against.
Councillor Parr.
Against.
Councillor Scroggy.
Against.
I should do so.
Councillor Wheeler.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Against.
Councillor Truscott.
For.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So that was not carried.
Okay, so we're in the situation again where we have to have an application to refuse this, formally refuse this application. So would somebody like to move that refusal?
Presumably that will need to be me again.
Presumably, yes. The mantle falls upon your shoulders. Who's going to second, Paul?
I'll second.
Okay.
So members, I'd like to provide some further advice in relation to the reasons for refusal, as I did in relation to the previous application. So again, reiterate my advice in terms of highway safety. There's no evidence. Members will find that very difficult to defend a reason for refusal based upon highway safety. Again, I've listened to the debate and reference has been made to the intensification of the use. There are concerns about the impact upon the character of the area. And again, there seems to be significant concern about the additional demands for very limited on-street parking to the detriment of existing residents. So my advice to members therefore would be the following reason for refusal. Proposed development would, by reason of the intensification of the use of the site, have an adverse impact upon the residential amenity of adjoining and nearby residents and the character of the area. The proposal would also result in additional demands for very limited on-site car parking to the detriment of existing residents. The development would therefore be contrary to policy LPD 32 amenity.
Thank you, Mike. As with the previous application, I think you've done an excellent job in terms of drafting. I'll help us draft the objections there, and I support that as the proposer of the motion to refuse permission.
You was on mute there, Councillor Truscott.
Man's muted again. Right, as I said, anybody got any comments or questions that they want to raise before that vote is taken? No? Okay then. Kate?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Adams.
4.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor David Ellis.
4.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
4.
Councillor Elwood.
4.
Councillor Hope.
4.
Councillor Keneally.
4.
Councillor Lawrence.
Against.
Councillor Miller.
Mute.
I can see Barbara said 4, although she's muted.
Can you unmute Councillor Miller?
She's done it.
Councillor Miller.
Yeah.
How would you like to vote, Councillor Miller?
I'm sorry about that. 4.
Thank you. Councillor Paling.
4.
Councillor Parr.
4.
Councillor Scroggy.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Councillor Truscott.
Against.
Okay, thank you. That was carried.
Good. Right, can we move on then? Something slightly less contentious. Agenda item 7, application number 2020/11110, Conway Road, Recreation Ground, Carlton. Application to install a 12-metre column, including concrete base for CCTV camera, which you'll find on page 72 of your agenda papers. I've already stated our collective non-pecuniary interest in this item, and Mike, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chairman. So the application is referred to Planning Committee because it's made by the Borough Council on land which is owned by the Borough Council. Relatively focused report which proposes the erection of a CCTV camera situated on a steel column. The officer recommendation is to grant planning permission in accordance with the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So the proposal, application 2020/110 for installation of 12-metre column on concrete base for CCTV camera. I will formally move the application as chair. And ask Councillor Wilkinson to second as Vice Chair.
Formally seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Do we need a debate on this? Does anybody want to ask any questions or challenge it or queries?
Just move it.
Barbara, are you sticking
Like, I'd just like to say I thank the Borough Council. The recreation ground has changed somewhat and it's being so widely used by the young families about there. And I do think we do need the CCTV camera there, just in case we do get very young children with the parents and we get any antisocial behaviour. I recommend the planning department for this.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else who are quite content we move to the vote?
Take it to the vote.
Okay, recommendation is on page 75 of your agenda papers to grant planning permission. Kate, you'd like to run through the councillors to record their votes?
Yes, Councillor Adams.
For. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor David Ellis.
For.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
For.
Councillor Elwood.
For.
Councillor Hope.
For.
Councillor Keneally.
For.
Councillor Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Paling. Sorry. Councillor Miller. Apologise.
For.
Councillor Paling.
For.
Councillor Parr.
For.
Councillor Scroggy.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Truscott.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That was carried.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 8, breach of planning control, reference 0182/20. 9 Gedling Road, Carlton, construction of an unauthorised building, which you'll find on page 80 of your agenda papers. Mike, would you like to say a few words of explanation on this one, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The outbuilding is situated forward of the front elevation of the dwelling. A retrospective planning application was submitted and refused due to concerns in relation to the visual impact of the development. The site is located in a prominent location on the corner of 2 public highways, and the development is extremely prominent within the street scene and dominates the front of the site and the host dwelling. It's recommended that enforcement action is taken in accordance with the recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll formally move this item as chair. Councillor Wilkinson to second for, please.
Formally seconded, Chair.
Thank you. I'll ask Kate to open the debate, or do we need a debate on this one?
Monstrosity.
Is everyone content that we proceed straight to the vote on this? If you want to say something, please stick your hand up. No? Okay. We'll go straight to the vote then, please, Kate.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
For, thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor David Ellis.
For.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
For.
Councillor Elwood.
For.
Councillor Hope.
For.
Councillor Keneally.
For.
Councillor Lawrence.
For.
Councillor Miller.
For.
Councillor Paling.
For.
Councillor Parr.
For.
Councillor Scroggy.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Truscott.
For.
Thank you, Chair.
I forgot to add that The recommendation is that the head of development and place be authorised to take enforcement action listed on the page. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That was carried.
Thank you. We move on to agenda item 9, which is breach of planning control reference number 0143/2020, land at 60 Woodchurch Road, Bestwood, material change of use of residential dwelling to warehousing storage, which you'll find on page 86 of your agenda papers. And I'll ask Mike to say a few words of this one as well, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Ongoing complaints have been received since 2015 about deliveries being made to the owners of this property receiving fixtures and fittings in connection with their kitchen business, which was operating at a shop nearby. It is understood that these activities have been intermittent since 2015. The use is considered to be out of character with the area and detrimental to neighbours' amenity, and will cause noise and disturbance to the occupiers of nearby dwellings, affecting their enjoyment of their homes. A senior management restructure took effect on the 4th of January, and the recommendation should be updated as follows: that the head of development and place be authorised to take all enforcement action, including the service of any enforcement notices, and in conjunction with the head of governance and customer services, take proceedings through the courts, if required, to ensure that the unauthorised use ceases. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'll formally move this item as Chair and ask Councillor Wilkinson to second it as Vice Chair.
Formally seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to raise any issues or make a contribution?
Move the recommendation.
Councillor Parr would like to
No. Sorry, I didn't have my hand up. I was just trying to eliminate it.
Okay, thank you, John. So are you all content that we move straight to
the
vote? And you've already had the recommendation. Could you run through the councillors for me, please?
Yes, Councillor Adams.
4, thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor David Ellis.
4.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
4.
Councillor Elwood.
4.
Councillor Hope.
4.
Councillor Keneatley.
4.
Councillor Lawrence.
4.
Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Paling.
4.
Councillor Parr.
4.
Councillor Scroggy.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Councillor Truscott.
4.
Thank you, Chair. That was carried.
Okay, thank you very much, Kate. Let's move on to agenda item 10, breach of planning control. Reference number 073/2020, land at 17 Upminster Drive, Arnold, construction of an unauthorised building, which you'll find on page 94 of your agenda papers. Mike, would you like to speak to this again for us, please?
Thank you, Chairman. In April 2019, the council was notified that a large building was being constructed in the rear garden of 17 Upminster Drive without the benefit of planning permission. The owner advised the building was intended as a residential annex to the main building for the family to live in. The annex was to provide 3 bedrooms, a kitchen and living room and bathroom facilities. A retrospective planning application was submitted to retain the building, but was refused planning permission in December 2019. The footprint of the building is comparable with that of a small bungalow. It is dominant and prominent within the plot, reinforcing the opinion that it is not ancillary to the host dwelling. It has an adverse impact on the character of the area, as the site is not large enough to cater for 2 independent units on the site, whilst maintaining an acceptable relationship with each other and with existing neighbouring dwellings. I recommend that enforcement action is taken in accordance with the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll formally move this item as chair. Ask Councillor Wilkinson to second as vice chair.
Formally seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody want to raise any questions, queries, comments on this one, Marge Paling?
Thank you, Chair. I just cannot believe that they thought that they could do this. Were it a true granny flat extension, it would not be so large. It is just so obtrusive. So obviously I will be voting for the motion. Thank you.
Any more comments, questions? No, you're quite content that we move to the vote. Right, recommendations on page 99 of your agenda papers that Head of Development be authorised to take all enforcement acts listed on that page. Kate, would you like to run through the list of councillors for me, please?
Yes, Councillor Adams.
4, thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
4.
Councillor David Ellis.
4.
Councillor Rachel Ellis.
4.
Councillor Elwood.
4.
Councillor Hope.
4.
Councillor Keneally.
4.
Councillor Lawrence.
4.
Councillor Miller. Councillor Miller.
4.
Councillor Paling.
4.
Councillor Parr.
4.
Councillor Scroggy.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
And Councillor Truscott.
4.
Thank you, Chair. That was carried.
Thank you very much. On to agenda item 11, report to committee, page 101. Application number 2020-0847, 1 Shandwick Close Arnold. 2-storey front extension was refused planning permission. Applicant appeal dismissed by planning inspectorate. Agenda item 12, report to planning committee, page 103. Application number 2019/1029, 10 Nottingham Road, Ravenshead. New dwelling within existing garden was refused planning permission. Applicant appealed. Appeal was dismissed by planning inspector, and the appeal by the applicant for cost was also dismissed. Agenda item 13, reports planning committee, page 105, future planning applications. Agenda item 14, planning delegation.
Councillor Truscott, my apologies, and Councillor Scroggy has got his hand raised.
Sorry, I missed that, Councillor Scroggy. Could you?
That's all right, Councillor Truscott. You were getting close to. I wanted to raise something under any other business, or sorry, item C. Chair considers urgent.
I'll come to that in a moment.
Thank you.
Agenda item 14, planning delegation panel action sheets, 27th November, page 107, 14th of December, page 109, the 11th of December, page 111, 18th of December, page 113. And finally, agenda item 15, any other business that the chair considers urgent. I don't think that any other business from the floor. Councillor Scroggy.
Yeah, just before my tablet dies, I just want to put on record my thanks for Mr. Avery's advice tonight. I know we've kind of given him a bit of a kicking and a bit of a tough task, but his advice is invaluable. That's all, Chair.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I don't think we've given him a kicking per se, but you know, we've certainly relied on his knowledge and experience, of which he's got loads, which is probably the reason why he's just achieved a new position as head of development in place, which we congratulate him on. Thanks to all
Absolutely.
of you. Thanks for all of you. It's been, you know, the first planning meeting for 2021. It's been a pretty long and grueling one. So thank you all for putting up with it and participating with, you know, with such good humour. Friendly people. Okay, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Stay
Chair.
safe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.